that. And one that's one. Yes.
The other
So
ones.
we, you know, move them around and.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I am not doing grandkids, then I'm cooking, I'm gardening, not now, but planning for gardens and.
Is-
Yeah,
Is that between several kids, like your kids? Or is
yes, it's, I have 3 sons.
Okay.
And 2 of them have children, yeah. So. I'm really anxious for the weather to switch, so I can get my motorcycle out, I'm going a little crazy right now.
Oh, and can I go?
Yes, yes.
What's right here?
Uh-oh, yeah. I know, nothing but number 2. It's almost like you're challenged and you have to do something else.
Yeah.
It was cool in here because the air conditioning had kicked on. Apparently it got so hot in here last night, the air conditioning was on.
Wow.
So we turned on the heat, but it's not bad right now. No, no. Well, let me tell you, on election day, it got up to 83 in here. We had to open all the windows. They've been-
82 degrees. Wow.
Yeah, 83 degrees in here, but people were melting.
All right, well, it is 9. Dan, do we have you on here? Hey. Alternative view, so we can at least. That's fine. Okay. Let me get started. Andy's with us. So this is the ordinance review committee. This morning, we've got myself, Councilor Laraway, chair of this committee, and then we've got Councilor Leo Kenny and Councilor Dana Merritt zooming in. We've also got staff member, town clerk Shirley Crosby here to help us out here. So I guess find the agenda again. And looking at items currently assigned to this committee is reviewing ordinance 28 personnel and new employee handbook.
Can't hear Dan. We're just talking.
Yeah, we can't hear you if you're saying stuff.
Hope you're not driving.
So that item that I just mentioned is going to be up for a vote on March 10th, the full council.
Sorry, I was distracted.
Oh,
What
gotcha.
item did you just mention?
We're reading ordinance chapter 28 personnel and employee handbook. So that we've already been discussing in some council meetings. So there's not really anything else for this team to do on that. So our agenda is as follows. We'll be starting a new meeting time, then going through review ordinances. I think we'll probably turn it over to Shelley at that point to have some suggestions about where we might go, what that work might look like. And then I don't think we have any other items for further committee. If there is anything, I would say that.
Look up and then one we just referred to.
Oh, is that what we, oh yeah, I was zooming into that. Let's see. All right, so first, let's determine our meeting time. Is there a day of the week that would work for especially you two? My mornings are quite flexible. But
Mine are as well. Monday is kind of a bad one, but I'm flexible most of it. I mean, this works. I think I was traveling, I was traveling. For me, I don't know, this was the whole day. And for me, but I don't know what happened that spurred us to require the change.
so today is Thursday at 9 a.m., which is slightly different than what we have been doing. Would a Thursday at 9 a.m. work for you, Dan? In general? It's Is your microphone working or set up? Do you have the audio input to the right place?
Never mind, Dan, I'll speak for you.
Well, why don't we,
What was it before, Rob? Sorry.
it had been the second Wednesday of each month at 10:30.
Yeah,
But I think that one no longer works for Dan,
right.
so. Perhaps one of the Thursdays at 9 AM, maybe we can, hopefully Dan can get his microphone working. So maybe let's move on from this item for now. Since that's sort of the thing that's kind of determined whether or not one of these might work. Dan, when you do get the microphone figured out, feel free to chime in and we'll return back to that item. So going to item 3, reviewing ordinances, I guess Shelley, what is your thought on the
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So I believe that the proposed review schedule got shared with the committee. And that is all the work, that was put together after talking with all the department managers to see what their needs were and what we felt was most urgent that we address. Within the grid, we've taken the actual chapters and categories, broken them up, and then given a rank to them as to where we feel it falls within a schedule. If we were gonna prioritize over like 3 to a 5-year period, what would be the most emergent as to what is the least important that we get to? I will preface this by saying that the town planner believes, of course, that.
Hi, Dan.
Can I just listen in on your speakerphone? This Zoom webinar's not working on my end.
Yeah,
This works? Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so Dan, did you hear anything that I said? Do you want me to start over?
You can just do a quick recap, thank you, I apologize.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I
I
was
thought
just,
it was 10:30 on the
oh gosh, okay. Yeah, no, I was just explaining the grid and the fact that I had sat down and went over all of the needs of ordinance work and policy work with our department managers to assess what each of their departments needed, and then where within a timeline over a 3 to a 5-year period, where they felt that their needs fell within that grid. And so that is kind of the backstory of the ordinance chart that got sent out that I believe you forwarded.
Yeah, it's excellent work, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And so I was just going in to talk about the town planner. So the town planner and I sat down and had a lot of extensive conversation around land use, shoreland zoning, site plans, building issues, town infrastructure issues. And her big hesitation about us doing a lot of that lift right now is she wants to have the comp plan pretty much sewn together before we really start tackling some of those. So in doing that, even though some of her needs are urgent, she would prefer that we let other departments step forward and get their needs taken care of and give her a little more time on the comp side. And so what I've been doing is trying to identify things that puts the town maybe in an upside down situation where we need to address them. In the 2 key areas right now that I've kind of identified we want to look at maybe as our first spring into this new role of the committee is we want to definitely focus and zero in on a GA ordinance revision, and I can explain all of that, and I'm prepared to do that today. And we also want to take a look at business licensing in general, and that's a complete review of what are we doing right, what are we not doing, where is the ordinance paralleling how we're practicing, or where is it like completely not matching what we're doing. So those are the 2 immediate ordinances that I think we could tackle as trials on how this committee would work with the council. And then any other ones that the committee would like to bring forward or the council may have in mind that they feel needs a first review at the start of this. As part of the proposed review schedule that I did send to you, I also borrowed a lot of language out of the state statutes, out of MMA's guidance, legal review, and policy revision in general, just so that you had all the framework you needed as we worked through as a committee and we could refer back to for reference. But outside of that, that's what I have for you.
Thank you. So looking at the parties that you listed as top, one was GA, and then what number was the other item that you were discussing?
Well, so let me look here, because interestingly enough, a lot of this lives in chapter 29, which is public health and safety. And it talks about like victulars and marijuana. And I would also reference chapter 34, which is traffic and vehicles, which there again falls under public safety. Because we actually have a whole section which we talk about vehicles for hire, taxi cabs, courier services. And we actually have it on the books that we're regulating those functions, and we clearly have never done that. And so in speaking with our police chief, we would like to revisit that section of ordinance to see what do we even want to entertain. And if we entertain any sort of regulation, does that need to be brought up to the current time frame? Because now I think the bigger issue would be that we would want to look at Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, those sorts of commerce versus.
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah.
And it may be that we don't want to do it. But if that is the case, then we need to remove it from ordinance. Because right now, we're not following what we have in writing.
Thanks, I wanted to ask her, what was the big thing that jumped out about business licensing and stuff, and that seems like one, like.
Yeah, so.
It's that stuff that's on there, that
Mhm.
we just either.
Yes. So what I can tell you, the big thing with the business licensing that is jumping out right now is that we have victulars, we have alcohol, and we have other things that we do as part of practice, but then we have establishments and or businesses that under state regulation, we're supposed to address that we don't even touch. And so it's strange to me that we've never really brought them into our business licensing, and we've only focused on certain types of business. So my best example for this is we have hotels in town, and we just put a hotel up to the university. We have absolutely no regulation whatsoever, any type of permitting, inspection, regulation on those types of businesses. But we got around it because when these types of businesses had victular or alcohol, we used that as its opportunity to be regulated. The issue is that some of these hotels, motels, innkeepers, they're not doing the same type of victulars or liquor now. So now we're not even having, if they're not submitting those two types of paperwork, we're not even getting into that business. We're not even technically. And then if you look at rental registrations, we do rental registrations all over town, but yet we don't necessarily regulate the trailer parks, the trailers, or the rentals of trailers. And so it's like, I think what we need to do is we need to sit down at the table and we need to really look at our practice in our ordinance and identify where there are gaps and how comprehensive do we want that licensing to be? And if we don't want it fully compensated, we want to remove the language that we're not following.
Yeah.
So that's it's more like a review and a good housekeeping measure and approach it from that. And then let those conversations organically happen.
Lee or Dan, what are your thoughts and questions?
What's the GA?
General assistance.
General assistance, and I can would you like me to explain that first and then have, Yep.
Let's see if Dan has any other thoughts and questions.
Okay.
For you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Shelley, thank you again for putting this together with the other department heads. I wanted to ask you, and but also especially Rob and Leo, in terms of the philosophy of this review, it feels like this is kind of a methodical sequencing of reviews that we should do as a ordinary course of business. But this does not preclude us from looking at other ordinances from a policy perspective, or if there's a priority for the community or something gets referred to us by the council. So like if we, like solid waste is what, chapter 28 or whatever chapter it is. If we plug that in for a year and a half from now, that doesn't mean we have to wait a year and a half from now to consider like Leo's, the item council referred to us from Leo. We could take that up apart from the broader schedule review of the ordinance. Is that, or the chapter? Does that make sense to people?
Yeah,
yes.
I totally agree with that.
Yep. And what I can share, Dan, is in my past history, working with other organizations and school districts and doing policy revision, you should always have a maintenance schedule. And it should rotate, and whether a policy needs to be addressed, changed, or revised, it should live somewhere on a schedule. Because when I talk about general assistance, you'll understand why not having a schedule is a bad idea.
I agree. Okay.
So,
So, and when,
Just on the solid waste one, for instance, we made a dramatic change in how we collect waste. And if you read that ordinance, that chapter, it still talks about trash bags and stuff like that. We're not collecting trash bags anymore. We use the big system. So,
right.
yeah, okay. I'll listen. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. What were you gonna say?
to your point, when you said, yeah, that makes sense. Do you envision that there will, the maintenance schedule isn't just, we're gonna go through. Are there things like general maintenance, or general assistance, that's on a schedule of every year, every 2 years, and other stuff is on a schedule of every 5 years, or is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and I think general assistance is gonna be the best example of where we really as a committee need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The case study on maybe the most
yeah,
consistent one we need to be staying on top of.
Maybe that's a good segue for you to tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking around what needs to happen right now around general assistance.
okay. So let me explain backstory. So general assistance is a state statute mandated program that municipalities are supposed to have, and they are supposed to stay on top of, making sure that we adhere to state statute and DHHS regulations. In order for municipalities to comply with that, they, on an annual basis, in the fall of every year, have to review Maine Municipal's draft ordinance and either accept it or have something that they're going to work from. But regardless, whatever they're going to work from has to be aligned with state statute. So we do this every November. And it's public hearing, it's then discussed, and you folks give approval, and we sign, and I file it with the state. So here's the thing. In somewhere around the 90s, the council at that time decided that they were going to take whatever the ordinance was at that time, and they were going to put it into the ordinance manual, so that we would have it as a living, breathing ordinance of how to conduct general assistance, okay? So 1994 was when the council adopted that, and it went in and was codified in our ordinance. It has never changed. It's never been changed, okay? So, every October, this comes out.
You mean the main municipal one? When you say in 94, what the council decided was to whatever main municipal association comes out with, that becomes our ordinance? Is that? Okay.
Yes,
Oh, okay,
Yep.
I was thinking we like froze down and we just hunkered down on the 94 one,
well, we did,
okay.
and we are.
Okay, so even though that council had decided that whatever municipal association came out with, we were gonna do that, we haven't been doing that in ordinance?
It stayed as 94.
Okay,
So now let's flash forward. A year ago, I had an internal audit in which DHHS sent somebody here to audit everything, okay? At that time, I was told we have an issue because you are under statute to follow your own ordinance. But your own ordinance does not match or align with state statute. So even though council had told me to follow this, the way that home rule works, if I have an ordinance in place that supersedes whatever this is. Well, the ordinance that I have to refer back to that I'm supposed to be implementing is from 1994. So I am in conflict when I administer the program. Because even though I'm supposed to be following this, because that's what you told me to do in the fall. Home rule says I follow my ordinance that is last adopted.
so the decision of the council in the 90s, was that itself not made in ordinance saying whatever municipal association comes up with, that will become our ordinance? Was that was just a council decision?
At that time, I can't speak to what was going on in the 90s.
Sure.
But back in the 90s, for whatever reason,
You were born.
oh, I was born, but
I was born.
I was quite young. The issue was back then, it was the intent to put everything in the ordinance because that's where we directed taxpayers and residents to go to figure out how we conducted ourselves. So in order to correct this issue and to make us more compliant, what I have done is I have drafted an actual GA ordinance statement that is much like what we did with the personnel policy guidebook. And what I've done is mirrored it against what state statute says that we must do and how we must be compliant. And it's going to be my recommendation to this committee once we flesh this out, that we completely strike all of chapter 16. Strike it all and replace it with this.
Rip and replace.
Yep. And this is short, sweet, and it directs this.
No, just out of curiosity, 94 or 2025 or whatever that is. Did any major things jump out like, holy, we are totally not doing that, and that's like to the detriment of our community?
Yes, yes, to the point that even how I determine whether or not somebody is eligible, if I follow what our ordinance says, I'm in direct conflict with what the state statute's telling me to do. And so right now, what I've been doing is I've been following state statute within reason, but I call Augusta for almost every case when I know I'm stepping out of the parameter. So,
So we've been doing the right thing, it's just not backed up.
it's not backed up. And if we were to have a hearing and be challenged in court with a determination of someone's application, I'm gonna have a really hard time trying to defend, because this and our ordinance don't agree. And somewhere in the middle, I'm trying to manage a program the best I can.
I think so for me, I mean, this all makes a lot of sense, and I see as part of this is making sure that a copy of each new ordinance will be available for public inspection. I think the main thing for me is just making sure that people know where to go if we are taking stuff out of along the chapter in the ordinance, making sure that it's clear to folks where they can go to find out, you know, what they have available for GA.
Yeah, so,
Outside of that, I think this makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
Yeah, and on that, I guess to Rob's point, and that's a 30-page, 40-page, or I don't know what that is, page policy there.
yeah.
Does it have a summary for someone that is actually trying to figure this out?
Look at that chart that.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
The office holds.
I mean, this is the guidelines
Mhm.
according to state statute and DHHS regulations of how I have to run the program.
Okay,
And then, of course, as I said, I have the ordinance over here.
Mhm.
But I think for the average public person coming into the office, that there's a chart that's available that someone can just ask for, and it breaks down a lot of the numbers. I've seen it.
It does. So, I mean, this is a good example of why I think having a regular schedule is important, because until an ordinance becomes a problem, you don't think about it sometimes.
Mhm.
And the fact that we've not done anything since 1994 with our general assistance ordinance speaks to it hasn't really been an issue. And I'll be honest, I was quite surprised when the state auditor said to me, the next time I come back, this is going to be a problem, because now it's been brought to your attention.
Yeah.
So I've got to do something about it. And I think it becomes really difficult if we do not strike all of chapter 16 and we try to take it and match it to this, then we're putting the burden of every year annually having to update an ordinance when that's not necessary.
Yeah.
So.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
So we've got this, then we've got this sort of multi-piece bit about other regulation that we're gonna want to discuss, but I guess I'm trying to think through what the workflow looks like for us, like what other kind of discussion we need to have on GA, first of all, and then what does the conversation look like for what you were raising before? It seems like it's touched on a couple of the different items that you raised in this chart that you gave us.
So would you like me to give you a practical housekeeping observation of how we should proceed?
Sure, I'd love to hear your suggestions.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So with the general assistance thing, I really think that this is pretty much, we can bang this out. What I mean by bang this out is we as a committee review this and have, you know, some time in a meeting where we pick it apart and say, does this match what we want it to say? And are we ready to push it forward? If we're ready to push it forward after Clint's back and we've had a chance to review it and digest it, then I would say it's as simple as us getting an agenda item requested, getting our public hearing scheduled, and we just move this forward. I don't see this being a heavy lift at all. You know, and if we didn't have this committee in motion, I would have just went to Clint with this and asked that this get on a town council agenda to get it addressed. So that's fine. With the
That
business,
can be easy, Shelley.
yes, with the business licensing, that is going to take some time, and it's gonna take some time at an administrative level for me to pull all the team members together and to sit down and talk about how do we want to approach this. Let's examine our practice and let's try to put something together that we can get in front of the ordinance committee to review to see whether or not it would be something the council would entertain moving forward. And I would think with everyone's schedule, a reasonable time frame of that happening would maybe be like a 3-month deal, where I would say to this committee, I'd like to have a couple of months to sit with the team and try to put together and explore what that might look like. And then when we're ready to bring something forward, I would get it on a schedule.
Would it make sense, Shelley, for us as a committee to be kept abreast of kind of where you are in the policy
Yep.
manual on that? So you mentioned chapter 29 and chapter 34, so 3 months, and as you're still gonna be discovering, okay, now, okay, this leads us to here, and this leads us to here. If we could, for me, because I'm a slow reader,
Yep,
if we could know where we're at and what you
Yep.
guys are working on, so we can try to be
Helpful.
up to date on like.
Right.
What's there, because if it ends up being, 100 pages of
right,
ordinances that are gonna be condensed down to something or changed around, it would be good to have that coming in to, in 3 months.
Yeah.
Having had the time to
right.
look at it like you guys have been looking at.
I would expect that each month when we would meet, I would give you an update of, this is where we're at, these are the issues we've identified. How do you feel about this? I'll take it back to the group. That's kind of the way I see that.
Thinking about our next meeting.
But can we talk about that other, the solid waste one too, so.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely get to that. Well, I guess, what were you gonna say about it?
Just, I guess, like, what do we think is the process on that as well?
Mm,
So again, I mean, it stemmed from this conversation about recycling and I gave full disclosure, I've got a 5-unit. And I don't know how many there are out there, but things fundamentally changed when we changed this latest contract with Casella. And now there's a finite amount that they'll take away from every house, and that changed from before, and we don't know. And probably it's not important, Sarah suggested, well, maybe it's because it's a business if it's 5. I don't know if that was their thinking. I have a feeling it was more about volume of trash piling up on the street, and that's where they can go on. So that's why I think this is, the game's changed. And quite honestly, when I thought it was like 3 was the max, and then I found 4, because I personally, I think, look over on Webster side and other places, but 4 is a lot. 8 barrels is a lot of barrels to be piled onto the street. So I was kind of surprised that it was that, but it is that. So maybe, I think the whole thing maybe is on the table on whether.
Yeah, I think
That's appropriate and how we're doing, we've had community members come forward about, hey, these things are getting off this. So
I think let's definitely have this discussion. I think we have time to maybe make that the bulk of the end of this meeting. I think trying to make sure that I don't lose track of some of the other things we've discussed. I want to make sure that I understand what our next steps are on the GA, on the regulatory elements. Then we can discuss the waste issue, and then we can, at the end, make sure that we determine our meeting time.
what do you mean regulatory?
The other stuff
Business licensing.
business licensing
Okay.
that Shelley was bringing up. So
And I thought I just heard from her, maybe I'm not sure what you're asking, because it seems like she just, go ahead, sorry.
So what I'm trying to think through for our understanding, just to say out loud, on GA, this team, this committee, for next time, should have probably read chapter 16, make sure that we're aware of the changes in detail, and make sure that we've read this draft change, so that we can discuss that for next time. That sound about right?
Yep, and I can send out the backup materials.
Great. Any questions on that?
Yes. So, and I guess I don't know what, this is just gonna refer to that, is that basically
Mhm.
to the new one?
Yep,
Okay.
Yep.
So reading chapter 16,
I think it's more just to make sure that there's
Makes
something
sense
in there
to
that
know
we
something.
think is valuable. And Yeah, I trust Shelley knows it better than we do, but you know, I think it's just up to us to do our due diligence there. So that's our action item on that, just to make sure that we're clear on what that commitment is for us. Then for the next item, I guess, what is, if anything, should committee members be doing for their homework for the following meeting?
So in regards to the business licensing or like regulatory, what I think is I need to talk with the team and see if we can pull this together and commit to it. The next meeting, I can report back on, this is the areas that we're intending to review. So I'm not sure, Rob, that this group has any homework on that.
Right.
I think that at the next meeting, I can give a report of where we feel we are. And do we think like a 2-month or a 3-month is reasonable for that work to be accomplished?
Okay, great. So we'll be awaiting your updates, and if prior to that meeting, if you do have anything that, you know, something for us to look at before we have the discussion, that'd be great.
Okay,
But understandable, you know, there's quite a bit that you have to do to prep that, so. Just, it's helpful to me to get clear on what our commitments are coming out of this.
Agree,
Yeah.
this is helpful, for sure.
Okay, great. So that's what we've discussed so far. Why don't we then jump back to the waste issue?
Well, and I think, I don't know that this is, we have to delve into all the details, like, I guess that my hunch is we have to come to an agreement that this is something because of what I just, you know, because we've changed, because we've had complaints about them on the street. I mean, this is worthy of having a discussion, so now how does that proceed, right? I mean, we don't have the ordinance in front of us, we're not looking at delving into that. And is that, so is it reasonable to suggest that our homework as this committee is to study, to bring back, and because I don't want to offload everything on the staff either.
right.
Now, one of the things I think Sarah said, and again, this is the back and forth on whether we drag staff in at this point, is, or Clint might have, no, Clint wasn't here, must have just been Sarah. Like if, you know, how many properties would this affect? But I think we can't ask that actually, because her and I left and we chatted about it, and she was like, well, does this mean any number, like 100? I'm like, well, no, because it's four barrels is the limit. So I think having a discussion internally before we set, and this isn't urgent, I don't think by any stretch, but I think it's a worthy policy or ordinance to review. So I guess maybe would it, again, not knowing how we're gonna function, our homework is let's bring a study of ourselves to that ordinance. When we come back, let's be prepared to talk about it.
And could you just speak partly for the purposes of posterity in the recording, but also for myself who was zooming into the meeting, but zoomed in the middle of the discussion. What is the specific issue at hand that we're trying to address? Because I know that there's quite a bit surrounding.
Yeah, so this again stemmed from, we had a discussion, we have now we agreed to put a recycle bin out, but it was like, hey, apartments aren't doing this.
Yeah.
This one is a way to capture those apartments that could recycle.
Talking about the new, like, that are accepting of traditional recycling materials, that's what you're talking about.
Right, yeah. So that came. You got something there?
Yeah, it seemed like it was, before when it was just, you put up as much garbage as you do and they pick it up no matter what. You had to have some kind of cap, and it was 4 units, so that 4-unit piece got transitioned into 4 bins. It's a big question in terms of equity fairness. Why is it that a 4-unit building that can have four bins, but a 5-unit building can't? I think it's a good question, and I also think if we're gonna do homework on this ordinance, it makes sense for us to look at. We have to define the ordinance, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
changed,
Yeah,
you know, and the ordinance still says garbage bags in it, or whatever the, bags. Last time I looked, I recall from the last time I looked at it, I obviously don't have it in front of me right now. But, I think the bigger question, can we verify that ordinance, and do we do it, as a standalone, or do we, right now it's listed as a third priority in the town, in the staff recommendation. I think we as a committee move it up, and one, it was referred to us, two, it just makes sense given the big change we've gone through as a community in terms of how we collect people's garbage and recycling.
Now, is this primarily an ordinance issue, or is this something to do with, like, our contract with the seller?
that would be that's, I think, the reason for will be involving staff is what impact would this have? Yeah, so there will be impact, yes.
I wonder if this is a matter of reviewing our entire, moving this entire thing, the entire chapter review up in our ordinance review, or whether it's trying to get at a more specific issue.
Right.
So maybe we don't need to be raising the entire solid waste management stuff to the top of priority, but just.
I like the way he just said, look, let's verify the ordinance. I think that's a good. Absolutely.
What do you think, Michelle?
So I would add that typically, it's been my experience that if you have made significant changes and or your practices changed, you really should pull up the entire ordinance. Have a member of staff go through chapter 30 solid waste and do what we call codify review, where we read it from cover to cover and we highlight anything in that chapter that is not aligning with current practice. And then once that's been done, we attack it as in, how do we get so that we match? And from there, we work in the other points, the other issues that are being addressed at a council level.
So you would suggest, sort of in agreement with what Leo and Dan are going with, that even though the rest of this isn't necessarily as high priority, you still just want to address it all at the same time?
Yeah, I think that is going to give you the most complete and thorough codified ordinance manual versus just taking it piecemeal.
Yeah.
Dumb question, like who gets assigned looking at the trash policy, waste policy? Who does that?
It's been how it's worked in the past is if we were going to attack an entire ordinance, different people would look at it with different lenses. I would look at it from a clerk's perspective of how it's administered at the front counter and what I do for my department within that. The public works director would look at the solid waste from their lens. And then the town manager would also look at it. And then we would have a staff meeting or a team meeting. And we talk about what are all the issues or concerns that we see with this ordinance and what needs to be changed. And then once we did that preliminary work, we would refer it on to like MMA legal or the town attorney to yet again put another lens on from a statutory or legal regulatory standpoint.
So then, timeline wise for this, you've already got some work to do with, other staff around business licensing, looking at all the ordinance stuff around that. So are we thinking that, we can make sure to raise this waste issue again at our next meeting where we're going to be discussing GA and business licensing, but just thinking about your own capacity, would it make sense to be having the bulkier discussion of this be the meeting after that? Just trying to think through how to sequence this so that staff's not having to take on too much at once. Obviously, council should be preparing at the same time, looking at these same chapters, but our discussions would be so heavily informed by, if we're looking at the whole chapter, what the recommendations are of staff. So it's going to take time to pull that together.
Right.
So just a question, I guess. what, do we have a role from a philosophical level of this, I mean, because the stuff, I mean, that's like the mechanics of how this stuff all works, which obviously has to, and again, I'm always, and I sort of lean towards, I want us to have this philosophical discussion about what do we think makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of before putting work on staff and
So
just, yeah.
looking at it from a 360-degree view, I think what council would need to do is decide where it fits in priority and where you want the attention to be given. So if you have your philosophical conversation, Leo, and it is the committee, or not committee, but it's the council's viewpoint that they think that this should be given the attention, then that's how we would then flex to fit into that. Because if we're directed that this is an ordinance the council wants to be reviewed and addressed, we're gonna shift the focus in that direction.
Does that make sense? I think.
But,
I'm
yeah,
tracking you.
no, I think what you're raising speaks to the function of the council as sort of the lawmaking body, the
The 10,
the group trying to provide a little higher level direction. So having some sense of what, first of all, the relative urgency of the request and what exactly the request is. Like, well, what the direction is that we want to go. So, I mean, I'm not feeling as strong an urgency around this. I am interested in seeing, you know, what's in contract versus what's in ordinance, what are the levers in general for addressing this, but I don't know, I guess I'm not sure how I'm feeling about it. Dan, what do you go?
Yeah, I think that's the 80-20 rule, sort of, you know, 30% of our direction and timing should come from staff's recommendations on what they're most interested, what matters most, where we're most not compliant, and how we can improve their efficiency. And then some element of council, of the three of us, particularly when something's been referred to the council, thinking about, you know, where we see an opportunity, and I do want to do it. While I do think a big part of the solid waste is to bidify. That's the big update, and why I think that would make sense is it's one of those things that impacts everybody in Orono, and it's woefully out of date, given we completely changed how we collect garbage, solid waste. So I think, to the extent that there's homework, I think we think about, we all look at that chapter, and then maybe have an informed conversation about what's in the chapter, and get some feedback from staff on, you know, what it would take to not ask staff to give us a whole, you know, I think the GA stuff first, then the regulatory stuff second, and then kind of work with staff to decide, is the solid waste worth moving up on our list versus leaving it as a number 3 and not getting to it until, you know, 3 or 4 years from now.
yeah, I think also that process allows us to maybe quantify a little more how much of a lift it is.
Yeah.
That's too.
So maybe that is, we should all, I mean, as committee, since it's been referred to us, think more clearly about what the issues are that we really feel are causing us to think that this might be in need of a stepped up timeline of addressing it. And maybe for staff, the question is, because we would be looking at the whole thing, what kind of, what amount of time work would it be taking to do that review? So we're thinking through what our priorities would be, and then we would discuss whether or not we really feel it is a priority, and staff would be thinking through what it would take. Sorry, I'm just saying that out loud for myself too.
I'll tell.
Okay.
So, sorry, Rob, I can tell if you're done.
No, go for it, Dan, please.
I do think, yeah, we'll have to decide, you know, this committee will have to decide either next time we talk or the time after that, if the referral that we got based on, the referral we got from this past council meeting is something we end up doing as a one-off. And, we gotta report back to the council, so either we, this idea is not something we wanna do, we don't recommend it, or we say, yeah, it's a one-off, and this is what it's gonna take, and these are the considerations that council will have to have in terms of cost, and this contract with, the seller, and stuff like that, Pine Tree. So I think we gotta be prepared to decide whether we wanna do it as part of I like Shelley's recommendation, and I'm gonna strongly kind of bias my thinking towards Shelley's recommendation that we do these in a comprehensive way every time we do them. But we have to make that decision as a committee next time we get together.
Okay.
And be mindful that we have an hour once a month, so it's how do we make it, we can always need more, but how do we make it fit that time frame and not
Well,
overburden staff?
I think as far as the next discussion we would have on this, I think we could fit that into our hour. Because I think the next time we talk, it would really be deciding, are we deciding that we're gonna take on this review of that chapter, or are we not? And at that point, we'll be able to report back to council a decision point on that.
Yeah,
guess
we're
it
gonna
is-
hold Leo, we're gonna hold the council and Leo a decision on whether, where we're gonna park that piece, whether we do it, as well. And I think, so we'll have to, whether it's a one-off or whether it's part of the broader, that'll be something we have to bring back.
All right, so I think for next time, let's plan to evaluate the relative merits of this from both our perspective and staff's perspective.
That makes sense, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So it seems like we've got a good direction on those three items. What we have left to determine is our meeting time. So Dan, now that we've actually got your voice with us.
This time should work for me, I do a lot of work the legislature. The legislature canceled its full sessions this morning. So it should work fine for me today, but they upended their schedule, so it's just a pre-thing. And this time does work for me moving forward.
Yeah, so you think Thursdays at 9 in general, the legislature won't be getting in the way for you? It's been a while since I used to go down to the legislature a few times a week for various.
Yeah, I usually don't have to do a lot of stuff, with the chambers themselves, like the full chambers. I'm focused, most of my work focuses at the committee level.
Yeah.
Those meetings are ordinarily in the afternoon. Unless something like today happens and they cancel the legislative session. So this usually works for me. And if it doesn't work for me, next time I'll know it in enough time so I can get to an office in Augusta and zoom in from 9 to 10.
So which Thursday? Right now we're on the, I guess, fourth Thursday of the month. Would that make sense? That would mean our next meeting would be on the 27th of March. Any problems foreseen with just going fourth Thursday?
It should work for me, yeah.
I think that works in my mind. I feel like since we push this off, the third would be a little more
Yeah, I like that.
in range.
Any concerns?
20th.
Yeah, so that would be the third Thursday.
The 20th?
Yep.
That would work.
Okay,
That works for me, thank you.
great. Sounds like it works for you, Shelley.
Yes.
Great. Easy peasy. Anything else that we need to discuss?
The only question I had that I wanted to ask before we concluded was, did anyone have any other ordinances they felt should be changed in rank of urgency? But I think that we took care of that one.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe we can keep an eye on that as council in general, especially looking at this chart that Shelley provided, that Dan also brought up to the top of our inboxes a few days ago.
Hey,
Yeah, go for it, Dan.
thanks. Shelley, does it make sense for you thinking about, how we approved this Casella thing a couple of years ago. It was like right after I first got on the council. Does it make sense for you to share with, Clay from the leadership team that when stuff comes up that, we're gonna do by policy, like a policy shift, we also need to be asking, what's the required ordinance change to be consistent with what's in the ordinance? I really don't like the idea of staff being in this middle ground that you're in on GA.
Right,
And if we're gonna make a change in something, we do it, so much of what we do is just by order. And if we're ordering something that's gonna impact without the corresponding ordinance change, we really ought to do those things together.
yeah, I agree with you. I think in the past, it may have been a matter of timing and or pressure because we were trying to get a lot accomplished and we thought in good faith, we'll go back and we'll take care of that because we have to get this done, but then things fall off the plate.
They do.
Yep. We have a good system now, though, of keeping track of those projects.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be very helpful.
Yeah,
So,
Alright, well, we are at 9:55. Is there anything else people want to discuss?
just to thank Shelley for all the hard work for this document. It's really helpful.
Yeah. thank you.
Yes.
It's really nice to be able to see all of it.
and I will send out the GA stuff just for reference material so that you have it in your boxes.
Alright, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alright, well then, that concludes
Thanks, everybody.
the ordinance review
Thank you.
committee at 9:55. Thank you, Dan. See you all
Like I
later.
said,
Bye. See you.
There, okay.
Awesome. Your day looking like Leo?
back to work.
Yeah.
What you got going
About the
on?
same.
Are you, teaching, or you got a show going
I've
on?
got multiple shows in this evening. I gotta go. I got a rehearsal this evening, but the day I gotta answer some emails. I gotta have a meeting or two. I gotta go through the whole score.